This isn't just a history lesson. This is the story of a heist. The biggest financial heist in the history of the world. And it happened in total darkness, on a private island, over 100 years ago. Let's set the scene. It's November 1910. A private railroad car sits waiting at a station in Hoboken, New Jersey. The curtains are drawn tight. One by one, 6 men board the train. They use fake names. They speak in hushed tones, instructing the staff not to look at their faces. They are traveling in absolute secrecy. These weren't just any 6 men. Combined, they represented an estimated 25% of the entire world's wealth at the time, a quarter of all the money on the planet, personified by 6 individuals, sneaking onto a train in the dead of night. Their destination, a remote, exclusive island off the coast of Georgia. Jekyll Island. Who owned it? None other than the banking titan himself, J.P. Morgan. Their mission, shrouded in the cover of a duck-hunting trip, was far more significant. They were there to write a law that would fundamentally change the United States forever. A law that would give a small group of private bankers permanent, legal control over the entire nation's money supply. Now, why would these incredibly powerful men feel the need for such secrecy? To understand that, we need to rewind just a few years to 1907. The Panic of 1907 was a brutal financial crisis. The stock market crashed by almost 50%. Banks failed, people lost their life savings, and the country was gripped by fear and economic turmoil. The public was angry, pointing the finger squarely at the big Wall Street bankers. But here's the twist. The crisis also terrified the mega bankers themselves. They realized their fortunes were vulnerable to these wild market swings and public panics. They needed a safety net. They needed a lender of last resort, a massive, centralized institution that could bail them out whenever a crisis hit. But they didn't want the government controlling it. They wanted to control it themselves. They needed a central bank that looked like a government agency but was, in reality, their own private entity. So, who were these 6 men? These architects of our modern financial system? Let's name them, because their names should be known. First, you have Senator Nelson Aldrich. He was a political powerhouse from Rhode Island, the father-in-law of John D. Rockefeller Jr. He was essentially the Rockefeller family's man inside the U.S. Senate, a key political operative for the most powerful industrial dynasty in America. Then there was Paul Warburg, a recent immigrant from Germany. He was a partner at the powerful investment firm Kuhn, Loeb and Company. This firm had deep ties to the Rothschild banking dynasty in Europe. Warburg was the intellectual mastermind of the group, the expert on European central banking who brought the blueprint for their plan. Next, Frank Vanderlip. He was the president of National City Bank of New York, which was, for all intents and purposes, Rockefeller's flagship bank. He represented the immense power of Standard Oil's financial empire. Then came Henry Davison, a senior partner at J.P. Morgan and Company. He was J.P. Morgan's right-hand man, representing the other titan of American finance. Benjamin Strong Jr. was also there, known as a key lieutenant of J.P. Morgan. He was a rising star in the banking world. He would later become the first governor of the Federal Reserve Bank of New York, the most powerful position within the new system they were designing. And finally, Charles Norton, president of the First National Bank of New York, another Morgan-affiliated institution. So you have the Rockefellers, the Morgans, and the Rothschilds, all represented in one secret meeting. These were not rivals meeting to compete. They were collaborators, meeting to consolidate their power over everyone else. They arrived on Jekyll Island disguised as duck hunters to avoid suspicion. They met inside the exclusive Jekyll Island Club, a private retreat for the world's wealthiest families. For 9 days, they worked in total isolation. No staff were allowed near their meetings. No minutes were taken. No official records were kept. Everything was done by word of mouth. They were creating a financial leviathan in a complete vacuum, with zero public oversight or input. The plan they hammered out was initially called the Aldrich Plan, named after the senator. It was a proposal for a National Reserve Association, which would be a central bank run by bankers, for bankers. When they presented this plan to the public, it was met with fierce opposition. The American people were deeply suspicious of a central bank, especially one so transparently controlled by the Wall Street powers they blamed for the recent panic. The plan was dead on arrival. But these men were masters of strategy. They didn't give up. They just rebranded. They knew they needed to make the plan sound like it was a government entity, something to protect the public interest. So they waited. They let the Aldrich plan fade from memory, and then, a few years later, reintroduced the very same core ideas under a new, deceptive name, the Federal Reserve Act. Federal made it sound like it was part of the government. Reserve made it sound safe and stable. It was a marketing masterpiece. They found a willing political champion in the newly elected president, Woodrow Wilson, who campaigned on a platform of banking reform. The final act of this conspiracy took place just before Christmas in 1913, on December 23rd, with most members of Congress having already left Washington, D.C. to be home with their families for the holiday. The Federal Reserve Act was rushed through a near-empty legislature. At 11:45 p.m., President Woodrow Wilson signed the bill into law. The trap was sprung. The heist was complete. Later in his life, Wilson would express profound regret. He wrote, "I am a most unhappy man. I have unwittingly ruined my country. A great industrial nation is controlled by its system of credit. Our system of credit is concentrated. The growth of the nation, therefore, and all our activities are in the hands of a few men." He admitted he had handed over control to the very forces he was supposed to regulate. So what was the result? The creation of the Federal Reserve System. It's not federal, and it has no reserves. It is a private corporation, a cartel of private banks, given a legal monopoly over the creation of money. Here's how it works. The Fed creates money out of thin air. It's just numbers typed into a computer. Then, it loans that newly created money to the U.S. government, at interest. Think about that. The government, which is supposed to be by the people, for the people, has to borrow its own currency from a private banking cartel, and then pay them interest on it. And who pays that interest? You do, the American taxpayer. Every dollar you pay in federal income tax goes, in one way or another, to paying the interest on this debt. For over 112 years, this private entity has controlled our economy, creating booms and busts, inflating away the value of our savings, and doing it all without ever facing a full, independent audit. They still try to label this well-documented history as a conspiracy theory, but the names, the dates, and the documents are all real. This wasn't reform. It was a takeover, executed in the dark. If you are just now realizing who truly controls the money, who truly runs the system, then you are waking up. Real freedom begins when you stop playing their game, stop serving their system, and start building your own. You need to find your tribe, a group of people who see the world for what it is, and are committed to building their own wealth, their own power, on their own terms. It's time to exit the matrix. It's time to move like those men on the train, but for the benefit of our people, our families, our future. We are building that tribe, a private, loyal, unstoppable brotherhood we call the Johanna tribe. Every member is vetted. Every member is ambitious. We operate with discretion and power. If you are ready to stop being a spectator and start being a player, we're looking for you. This is for the men who are awake and ready to act. If that's you, I want you to send your CV to our private email right now. Spots are extremely limited because we value quality and loyalty above all else. This is your invitation to the other side. Welcome.